Hi, everyone. My name's Rowdy Gaines. I was born and raised in Florida, two-time Olympian. I won 3 Olympic gold medals in the 1984 games in the sport of swimming, and just called my 8th games this past summer in Tokyo for NBC in the sport of swimming. So I'm really looking forward to answering your questions along the way.
Welcome to the Greg Bennett Show. I'm your host, Greg Bennett, and I've just finished a wonderful conversation with the voice of swimming, the multiple Olympic champion, world record holder, world champion, Mr. Rowdy Gaines. And in this conversation, we talk from everything from how Rowdy started swimming to the 1980 boycott and the Olympics that he missed that, he truly would have won 3 or 4 gold medals there. Most likely he was by far the best swimmer in the world at that time. Then deciding to keep going until 1984, even though there was no professional swimming as such. So he was working, from 8 p.m. till 4 a.m. in the morning and then training twice a day and sleeping during the in-between workouts. Just incredible story. And we're only talking, 40 years ago. But then his world in the announcing world and the major Olympics that he's been a part of, 9 Olympics he's now gone to, 9 Summer Olympics in a row. And he's called swimming events in all of them. We dissect who we think are the greatest athletes of all time, where swimming is now and where it's likely to go. But just a really fantastic conversation with one of the great minds in the world of swimming. A little bit of housekeeping before we go on. Thank you so much for listening. If you are enjoying the show, you'd be doing me a tremendous favor if you would share it and really get the word out there. You can also find Rowdy Gaines on Any Question. And if you go to anyquestion.com/Rowdy Gaines, that's anyquestion.com/Rowdy Gaines, you can find him there. You can listen to all the answers that he's already got there, and you can ask him some of your own follow-up questions after this episode of the show. Once again, thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I did. And remember, success comes to those who endure just one moment longer. All right, today's guest is an icon in the swimming world. He's a 3-time Olympic gold medalist, 6-time world champion, and he set 10 world records in the 100-meter and the 200-meter freestyle between 1978 and 1984. He's a US Olympic Hall of Fame member, and for the past 20 years, he's become the voice of swimming. What I truly love about this man is just his absolute passion. It's absolutely contagious. His answers on the Any Question app have all just been brilliant, and I'm thrilled to be able to speak to him today and just dive a little deeper. So welcome, and thank you for joining me on the Greg Bennett Show. Rowdy Gaines, how are you, mate?
Thank you so much, Greg. I need to take you on the road, mate, and have me introduced that way more often. I love it. You gave me lots of kudos there. I don't even know if they're all true, but I love them anyway.
Yeah, mate. I've had to dial it down a little bit. When I look at someone like yourself, I actually had to kind of go, well, let's shorten that just a little bit. Oh, my gosh. One of the things I do enjoy on this show is I bring on remarkable people that have wonderful stories and journeys, and I do enjoy celebrating and recognizing early in the show. So kudos to everything you've done, mate. Where are you at the moment?
I am in Port Charlotte, Florida. Dude, I'll tell you a 30-second story. We lived in Orlando, right, for the last 12, 13 years. And I lived 5 minutes from Disney World. So I was like in the urban mecca of the world, right, next to New York. And we just said, you know what? My wife and I said we wanted a simpler lifestyle. So right now, I can't turn the camera around and show anybody, but because I know I'll mess things up. But we live about a mile out in the country on a dirt road. Where we bought a little piece of property. We're rebuilding a house and live right next door to my father, who has a piece of property out here, and just a real simple lifestyle. I've kind of toned things down as I've gone into my the twilight of my years, so to speak.
That's fantastic, mate. I actually did see when you answered on Any Question that you'd moved out to the woods in Florida, and you said you were trying to learn, new skills in carpentry and building. How's that all coming along?
Oh my gosh, that's right. I do remember answering that question, right? They asked me what new skills I'd like to learn. Well, the house that we're moving into, Greg, dude, it was like built in the 50s, and it's 1,200 square feet. So we're going from like 4,000 to 1,200, and we're taking it down to studs and kind of starting over. So I've never done that. I mean, I've probably bought and sold 7 or 8 houses during my lifetime, but it's always buying a house. We've never started from scratch, so to speak. And so it's really exciting. It's a new adventure. And, I really recommend that to a lot of people. When I got that question on Any Question, I thought it was really cool because, I'm 62 years old and, I am so set in my ways. I am so boring. And I thought, it'd be really cool to kind of learn a new craft, learn a new trade. I suck at it, but at least I'm trying, I'm trying to do things new and being creative. Believe me, I'm not building the house. We hired somebody to do it, but I'm pitching in everywhere I can. So
I love it, mate. I think that's fantastic. And I'm much like you. We sold our house in Colorado, moved down here, 5,000 square foot home to a 1,200 square foot apartment. So, and I've got a 4 and a 2-year-old with me right now. So we always going forward, I guess. But it's I get the idea of you kind of downsizing, but I'm not learning a new skill in terms of building a house. But I am learning a lot by suddenly working in the tech startup space of Any Question, which has been drinking through a fire hose and learning and growing. So I get it. Well, mate, we got a lot to cover. I mean, your swimming career and the ups and downs of that, your announcing and I guess where swimming is today. So why don't we just get started? One of my favorite questions is to just let's rewind the clock and just tell me, when did your passion for swimming first begin?
Well, I backing up even further, I grew up in Winter Haven, Florida, Greg, which is like if you threw a dart, you'd hit right in the middle of the state of Florida. And Winter Haven has 120 something lakes. And I grew up on Lake Eloise, which is the same lake that the ski attraction called Cypress Gardens was on. And my parents water skied for Cypress Gardens. So I grew up around water my whole life, but I never swam competitively. I learned how to swim before I learned how to walk. I was 9 months old when I learned how to swim. But when I got to high school, I started trying out for all of these sports and I kept getting cut in every one of them. And after 5 sports, swimming was next. I thought, swimming, I do that for fun. I'm not going to do that for competition. But decided to go out for it, and I'm making it a long story. But long story short, I think after about 2 weeks of not being cut, first of all, and actually swimming in a meet where, and that's a long story, but I found my passion after about 2 weeks of being involved in the sport and said, oh my gosh, I love this sport, and I'm going to do everything in my power to try to be successful in it. I didn't think anything about the Olympics, but I really wanted to be a good swimmer. What that meant, I don't know, but that I think the fire really started after not being cut from the team.
So was that like you get that, well, like not getting cut, you get that pat on the back that says, oh, maybe I'm okay at that. Was that the moment you were like, oh, I've got some ability, or was it later on you kind of did an event or did something like?
No, that's a great point, Greg, because it was literally somebody on the team that gave me that pat on the back. It was a literal pat on the back. It was a senior, Johnny Patterson. I'll never forget. Came over as a junior of 17 years old. Johnny, after about 10 days, dude, I was swimming with my head out of the water. I couldn't do a flip turn. I sucked. But Johnny came over to me after a practice one day and patted me on the back and said, hey, nice job today. You're getting the hang of this. And for some reason, it just meant so much to me. Like, just like you said, it was just like, I think I realized that, I'm going to be okay here. I feel like I'm going to make it and have this be a sport at least I can enjoy in high school.
Yeah. I mean, you started it so late. I mean, 17, anybody would say that these days, if you're starting a sport 17 and could you win an Olympic gold, or I think we'd all be like, well, maybe, but I mean, was that the norm in your era there, or no?
No. It's been, it's been like that for generations that you start at a very early age. Now, there have been great swimmers. I don't know about the international side, but John Neighbor, who was a great Olympic champion in '76, he didn't really start till he was 12. Matt Biondi he played water polo for much of his career and didn't really start swimming till he was 11 or 12. But 17 is kind of old. And but again, I take you back, Greg, to Winter Haven, growing up and having water being part of the fabric of your being. It's like you, Greg. I mean, you grew up, you know, in an environment where water is part of who you are, you know? And so for me, it was the same way growing up in Florida. So I think it was in my blood. I just didn't realize it.
Yeah, I've noticed Florida and Australia have a lot of similarities. Right. You're either sailing, water skiing, swimming, whatever it is, it's something to do with water. And the great athletes that come out of these places tends to be nautical in some form or another. You mentioned something which I thought was really cool, is that mentoring and that role of just getting somebody patting you on the back and you going, oh, somebody else believes in me. I think we can all do better in recognizing others and mentoring the new generation coming through. I love the fact that was the moment that you were like, oh, maybe I will stick with this. Was there another moment that you moved onwards where, you know, hang on, maybe the Olympics is even a possibility, you know, moving forward?
Yeah, you know, I mean, flash forward a year. I made the state championship that spring. Went down. There were 16 swimmers. I finished 16th.
Wait, did you have head down by then, or were you still swimming head out of the water? And were you doing flip turns?
I finally learned to swim with my head down, but you should have seen my flip turns. In fact, I think on the third 25, I did a wall turn. I didn't do a flip turn because I had run out of gas. So yeah, I finished 16th. But that was another inspiring moment, Greg. You know, you talk about, it was a motivational moment, you know, because I was upset. You know, I thought, I don't want to be in this kind of position anymore. And I felt grateful that after swimming for 3 months that, you know, I was able to even qualify. Only 16 qualified in the whole state, and felt lucky to be there. But it was another inspiring moment. But flash forward another year, and back to your question, I think I won my state championship my senior year in that same event. And I think for me, the fire started burning inside me. Again, not so much about the Olympics, but I wanted to be good, not just in the state of Florida, because that time, you know, back then we got Swimming World magazine, and, you know, I looked up my time and it was in the top 10 in the country in high school. And I thought, wow, if I'm one of the top 10 in high school, you know, and I've only been doing this for a year, maybe the sky is the limit for me. And to borrow an old cliche, but I think there were certain moments, stepping stones along the way that certainly were inspiring moments. Some of them were valleys and some of them were peaks, but they all played a part in my success, I think.
I mean, there's obviously some, you know, I don't like to dwell on talent versus non-talent, but there's obviously some talent that you can jump in the pool and, you know, a year later be winning, you know, the state championships. But was your family background one of, you know, discipline, or how did your parents raise you to the point that, you know, to become a champion, there's a lot more than just being able to turn the arms over in the pool. There's a mindset and there's a way that you carry yourself. Was there anything instrumental from your family values that you took to swimming? Well,
I mean, I won 3 gold medals in LA. I gave one to my mom, one to my dad, and one to my coach at the time, Richard Quick, because I couldn't have done it without their love and their support. So getting to your question is, you know, my parents were very supportive of me, but they were really hands off with my swimming. My dad was more about, you know, oh, you just broke a world record. Cool. How'd you do on that test yesterday? You know, and my mom was like, you know, falling on the ground, emotional, crying, you know, when anything happened in swimming. So they both came at it with a little bit of a different attitude, but both of them were very supportive. And I owe a lot to them for being there. It comes down to, again, it's cliche-ish, but unconditional love. I think that's what you need from your parents, from your family, not just, maybe it's not a parent, maybe it's a grandparent or aunt and uncle, or brother or sister. That unconditional love is important from your family and friends. And for me, that was a deal changer, so to speak, in the fact that I was able to rely on that unconditional love and not worry about how they felt about how I did in swimming or not.
It's the ultimate privilege, isn't it, to have that family environment where you know you can always come home no matter what happens. You can go and explore the world, and no matter what happens, I can come home and still be loved. For me, that's the ultimate privilege.
It is.
Yeah.
And we're not all blessed to have that.
Oh, absolutely not. No.
I can't imagine not having that. I don't, there's no way I would have been able to do what I did. I broke my first world record 2.5 years after I started swimming. So your statement about talent is very true. I was blessed. You know, however you feel about, you know, your religious beliefs, or whoever feels whatever, there's no doubt in my mind anyway that I was blessed with some sort of God-given talent. You
have that, but it's also you unwrapped it. And I think, you know, all of us have talents. We all have something within us. And to be able to identify it and then unwrap it and let it shine is a whole nother game. Was there a point that you said, okay, swimming is what I'm going to do? That's put my blinders on. This is what I'm going to do. Was there one moment, or was it built over time?
No, there was that I go back to 2 weeks after I got to the long story I was going to tell you, I'll shorten it. 2 weeks after I started, Greg, we swam in our first meet, right? And my coach put me in the 500 freestyle. By the way, the coach was also the football coach who had cut me once already. So he said, I'm going to put you in the 500 freestyle, hoping to get rid of you, right? And that's when I went like 9 minutes, and I literally went 9 minutes, 19 seconds. That's when I did know how to do a flip turn, running into the lane lines like I didn't have goggles, running into the lane lines like little 6-year-olds. But he put me on an E-relay, 200 free relay at the end of the meet. I was on there with a couple of chess club guys and band members, but I outsplit everybody else on the team, those A, B, C, and D relays. And I think that moment when the coach looked at his watch and then looked at me and kind of nodded his head, I think that was the aha moment. Like, holy crap, I love the sport. So you should have seen me. I started going to the library and checking out books on swimming. Back then, that's what we did. We didn't go on the internet, obviously. I remember getting Deep Water by Don Scholander, 50-Meter Jungle by Mark Spitz, Doc Councilman's technical book. And I just started consuming everything about swimming, the history of the sport, the technical aspect of the sport. I wanted to know everything I could about swimming. And I did that for, you know, really throughout my whole career. I love the history of the sport.
It's like I said in the introduction, you're one of the most passionate announcers in the world, and you just, through that passion and the way that you commentate these events, you can just tell that this is your true passion. It's like you're consumed by it. To some degree, I look at myself as a young triathlete. I was exactly the same in the 80s. You know, it was like I just watched anything I could. I'd sneak in the back of bars to be able to watch it on the Sky television, all the races that were happening in the US, and, you know, watching the Olympics. And you guys in sort of 84 was obviously, I was 12 then, so it was very instrumental in sort of my life and what I wanted to do. And so like you, I've had this enormous passion, and that's studying the history, getting to know everybody. And it's part of the reason I do this podcast, to be honest. I get to chat with just incredible people that are doing remarkable things. And it keeps that passion alive for me, especially as I get a bit older and I can't quite do it as well as I used to. And so I can watch from the sidelines, but I can still live it a bit like you are doing with your announcing. Right. You mentioned in Any Question about managing your mental game. And you said, you know, life is just full of ups and downs and peaks and valleys, and we're shaped by these experiences. And the losses or the tough times are often when you can learn the most. So on that, I kind of want to sort of dive into maybe your least fondest memory of your athletic career, and maybe understanding what you learnt from that and how did you grow from that. So was there one thing that kind of stood out to you?
Well, sure. I mean, for me, obviously, and it's kind of obvious, I guess, but it has to be the boycott of 1980. And that was out of my control. It was certainly a valley that I didn't control. I controlled some of my valleys, but that one was one that I couldn't help. It was tough, Greg. I mean, because as you know, more than anybody, the Olympics is sort of the pinnacle of success in our sport. Maybe triathlon, you have different pinnacles because of the distances and stuff. But the Olympics, especially now that triathlon is a mainstay in the Olympics, and if you do that type of distance, the Olympics is a pinnacle. And certainly in swimming it is. And to have that taken away was tough, because as most of us know, the Olympics is every 4 years. It's not every year. So that time period for me was an 8-year journey.
Just for our younger listeners, just to give reference, so 1980, President Jimmy Carter announced that the United States would be boycotting the Summer Olympic Games that were to be held in Moscow in the USSR, basically because of the Soviets' invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. And so the boycott was it was accompanied by other measures and embargoes and everything else, but they used the not sending the athletes to that games as a way of saying, pull your troops out of Afghanistan. There were about 60 or 70 other countries involved, but US and Jimmy Carter really took the lead on that. What was crazy is they did it so late, like so close, and to give reference to you were the world champion, world record holder, 78, 79, have to be a pretty massive favor for 3 to 4 gold medals going into that games. And then it was a couple of 3 months out, you were told you're not going. What was that experience like when you first heard the news that they're actually going to postpone those games? How did you manage it? And what was that first experience like?
Well, it was much more difficult for me because leading up to it, I had broken my first world record, April 1st, 1980. And I broke a Soviet, his last name was Kopelikov, Konstantin Kopelikov from Russia. I broke his world record in the 200-meter freestyle, my first individual world record. The day after I broke that world record is when the United States announced that we would officially boycott those games. And again, that was, like you said, about 3 months before. It was tough. But Greg, I look back and I look at the blessings that I had that I was a swimmer. And yes, that was a valley, but I came out of it. And I was a very fortunate athlete in the fact that I got to experience 1984. There were 363 athletes that made the 1980 Olympic team that did not make it in 76 and did not make it in 84. So that was their lone Olympic team was 1980. Those are the athletes that are real sports heroes. I don't like to use the word hero too much when it comes to athletes, but when you're talking about athletics, those are the real heroes because they did the same thing I did, but never got to experience what an Olympics was like. And I think that's what we aspired to do. We wanted to be an Olympian, because once you're an Olympian forever and ever. Even though I made the Olympic team in 1980, along with so many others, it was an empty feeling. And then you have to explain, I was a 1980 Olympian. Well, how'd you do? Well, we didn't get to go because blah, 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 blah. And it's a tough position to be in for sure. But I felt so much love for those athletes that didn't get a chance. So it's hard for me to talk about it to where it was that tragic because I had my day in the sun.
You still got to do it again. But there was, I mean, I'm just putting myself in your position and I have tremendous empathy for you and all the other athletes that was taken away from. But did you have a moment, or there must have been a point that you felt like, okay, I'm just going to give it away? Because, the sport then was very different in terms of commercialism and professionalism. And, maybe I've got to go get a job now.
There was no money.
No money. So at what point, and how did you dig yourself out of, I can imagine, a bit of a funk and get yourself going and get excited about, 84 and swimming again?
Well, fortunately, 1980 happened during a good time of my life, meaning I was World Swimmer of the Year in 1980. I was really riding a high as far as my performances were going. And, Greg, I was entering my senior year in college. So it had happened right after my junior year, which I won a couple NCAA titles. We had a top 5 finish as a team at Auburn. So I was entering my senior year. I got elected team captain. So I had my teammates to kind of wrap their arms around me, and I would wrap my arms around them, and we bonded as a family. Those were my brothers and sisters, and I was able to kind of use that as motivation going into my senior year. I didn't want to let my team down. When I graduated, that's when it really became tough, because I retired after my senior year. You did what everybody else did up to that point. You retire from the sports. Mark Spitz was 21 when he won 7 gold medals.
Wow.
John Neighbor was 20. I mean, nobody swam post-collegiate because there was no money. We weren't allowed to take money. It wasn't the fact that there wasn't money. You weren't even allowed to. Back then, it was strictly an NCAA type rule, in the fact that you were not, only amateurs were allowed to compete in sports. That's why we didn't have a dream team in basketball until 1992. So, it was, I quit. I retired. And, but after about 6 months, my father came to me and said, are you going to be able to look at yourself in the mirror for the rest of your life and say, what if? And listen to the national anthem, or hear the Olympic theme, or see the Olympic rings. It's going to affect you the rest of your life if you don't do it, win, lose, or draw. And that's when I decided to do it and go for it.
I mean, that being a home Olympics, that must have been a little bit more of I got to make this happen as well. I mean, it's one thing if it was overseas, but a home Olympics, did that sort of drive that as well a little bit?
It did a little bit, yeah. But I was also, Greg, I tried to be as much of an optimist as possible, but I was a little bit pessimistic that there would even be an Olympics in LA. With the boycott and everything. My viewpoint on the Olympic movement in general had soured a bit. And we were right fresh in the middle of the Cold War with the Soviets. So, there was a lot of unknown leading into those next 3 years. But I go back to saying that I just so desperately wanted to call myself an Olympian at that point. For 2.5 years, my daily schedule when I graduated from college in 1981 until the trials of 1984 would be morning practice, sleep all day, and then I worked as a night clerk in a hotel from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. shift. Go home, sleep for about an hour, and then start all over again.
I love these stories, Rowdy. I love these stories. You and Frank Shorter. I don't know if you know Frank
Shorter
very well.
I know Frank very well.
So Frank was my neighbor in Boulder. We both sold our houses in October this year, actually. So we're not neighbors anymore, but we got to know each other pretty well. And I had him on the show probably about 6 months ago. And the stories that you guys have, it's a different climate. It's a different culture. It's talking about the professionalism in sport. And, I know Frank and his stories with Prefontaine and them trying to, figure out where the money's going that, was getting paid to the US athletes, but the athletes weren't getting it themselves, and it was disappearing. Right. And it's kind of like, what's going on here? And to hear you working, from 8 p.m. till 4 in the morning, and then swimming twice a day and sleeping during the day. What I love about that is this tremendous desire to do something great. It's like, it's one thing to say, oh, Rowdy Gaines had some talent, like we talked about earlier, you had some talent. But it's different to say, okay, that Olympics was taken away from you. Now we're going to, for 2.5 years, you can go if you want, but this is what it's going to look like. And there's not many people that are going to raise their hands and go, oh yeah, I'll do that. That sounds like something I want to do. Something right there, I think, is tremendously, you've got to be proud of that kind of an effort, because it's not just getting the USOC funding and a big contract from Speedo and away you go and train and sleep and, eat right and build your team around you. It's, no, I'm on my own and this is what I want to do. And what I love also, and we can talk about this in a moment, your times are still very competitive. Even if we talk 40 years later, I think it's outstanding. So let's do this. We've talked about your least fondest moment. let's fast forward a bit, or maybe it's not fast forward, but your fondest moment in your athletic career. What is it?
Well, I think the easy answer is, you know, when I won the 100 freestyle in '84. And that, I mean, I can't sugarcoat that.
No.
More than, but you know, I think the memory that holds the fondest to me is, I know it sounds silly, but I think it's when I won my state meet my senior year in high school. The joy that I remember is even more so than when I won the gold medal in the Olympics.
Oh, I love
just
that.
Purely from a, you know, from a kid standpoint. I'm, you know, 17, 18 years old, and the joy that that moment brought me was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
And again, it goes, it goes back to, you know, where I started thinking more of on a global scale when that happened. And I made a big drop. You know, Greg, for us, you and I, everything revolves around the clock, right? Our careers revolve around a stopwatch. It doesn't have to be that totally, but in so many ways, that's what it is. You know, for a triathlete, it's all about the clock. And for a swimmer, it certainly is. And for me, I made a huge drop. My best time going into that state meet was 1:46 in the 200 freestyle. I went 1:41. Wow. So it was like, you're okay in Polk County 1:46 to 5-second drop. And now, oh my gosh, I'm one of the best in the country. High schoolers. And so that was a huge moment for me. And I didn't make that drop at the Olympics. And Olympics is a completely different animal because the clock doesn't mean anything there. You know,
win the race. Yeah,
the clock is irrelevant. You know, I think both of them together have had different feelings, but I would stack the one in high school with the one at the Olympics as far as pure joy.
I know, that's fantastic. It's often the way though. It's like sometimes, you know, people, there's almost like, of course it's going to be the Olympic 100 meters. They're like, actually, my life is made up of, there's more pieces to this than just that one moment. But I do want to discuss that Olympics a little bit more, because hometown Olympics, world record holder, world champion going in, missed the 1980 Olympics, hanging on for that long. You said on, again, I mentioned the Any Question app, but I've loved all your answers on there, so I'm going to mention it again. You said, somebody asked you about, you know, how do you manage stress and anxiety? And I can only imagine the amount of pressure that was both put on yourself and from others going into that Olympics. But you said on Any Question, you know, you embrace the stress in a positive way, that you accept the stress and the anxiousness, that's actually how you're going to get the most out of yourself, that you just let it be in you and it's okay. Take me through just the pressure of that 1984 Olympic Games and the gold ribbon event, the blue ribbon event, the 100-meter freestyle experience, and what was that all like, you know?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think you have to understand that I was at the tail end of my career, Greg. I was 25. In fact, I was the third oldest swimmer in history to win a gold medal individually at 25 when I won the 100 freestyle. And to be honest with you, we could have swam that race 10 times and I would have lost 9 of them. I was not the best swimmer in '84. There were 4 or 5 guys that were better than I was. But everything, it was just a perfect storm for me in the preparation leading up to that moment. You know what I mean? You know how we prepare for the moment, meaning getting a good night's sleep, eating a good meal, all the things warming up for the race. Obviously, what you did beforehand as far as the training goes, but it's also the week or so leading up to the big event that you have. You know, how does that go for you? Do you have sleepless nights? Do you have food poisoning? Or, you know, I mean, there's so many things that can go wrong. And for me, everything went right. You know, I got a great roommate at the Olympics. He let me, it was Matt Biondi.
Wow.
He let me turn on my box fan as you know, that static noise. In fact, to this day, 35 years later, he can't sleep without a box fan. He still gives me grief about it. And I got a good meal. I didn't sleep too good the night before, but I got a really good nap. You know how naps are for athletes. Boy, if you get a good nap in, that's just killer. I know that sounds so minuscule. You're thinking, what's the big deal? But it was like everything leading up to it was perfect. I laid off my legs in the morning in the prelims. Which I had not done the previous 2 years. And I kept failing in finals in the 2 years leading up to that. So I really kind of took a risk and backed off my legs. I was seeded third going into the finals. So nobody really expected me to win. And walking out, Greg, you know, I had 20,000 people cheering for me. And I felt that energy. I know that sounds corny, but I felt the love and I felt the energy from that crowd because, as you said, doing it at home was really special. And if the Olympics had been in Seoul, Korea, or Moscow, Soviet Union, I don't think I would have performed at that high of a level in that one race. So everything was perfect. Again, we swim it the next day, I would have been fourth or fifth. But for me in that day, it was everything just lined up. The stars aligned for me. And the biggest thing, Greg, I know I'm flapping my mouth here, but the single most important thing was my start. If you watch my race from the Olympics, it all boiled down to me having a great start. And that was my coach. I'll tell you a quick story, dude. So in the Olympics, at least back then, there are 3 starters, right? And they rotate. I swam the third day. This is long story short, but I swam the third day. There was a starter that basically said, take your mark, bang. I mean, he wouldn't even let you get set. And he started a couple of races those 2 days before. I didn't notice it, but my coach did notice it. He came to me and said, we have to change your start, because I went down really slow, just like everybody else, and tried to time my start. And he said, you've got to come down quick. If you don't come down quick, you're going to get left on the blocks potentially. I thought he was nuts. Dude, he's changing my start 24 hours before. And this is a start I had been working on for 2.5 years. It was a track start, which we created. I created the track start. Are you
the one that created the track start?
Yeah.
I should know that. That's awesome. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I was the only one that did it in 84. Yeah. I was the only swimmer to do a track start. And I started it in 1982. So I had been working on this start. And so, again, the perfect storm. It was just he changed my start, or the cadence of coming down on my start. That was a difference maker. It was just like everything worked out perfectly. So, you know, my coach, that's one of the reasons why I gave him my gold medal, because he deserved it. I would have been left on the blocks just like everybody else. Yeah. And who knows what would have happened. I would have been fourth or fifth.
I did watch the race in prep for this. It's one of the joys of having these conversations is my homework is just so fun. And I did watch that race, and you turned with a clear half body length on the field. I've heard you say, you know, on any question, you know, that third 25 is the key 25 to swimming 100 really well. And you could see that in that race. And then I think it would have been 3/4 of a body length win at the end. And there's a tremendous joy in your face. Was there any relief, or was it all joy when you finished?
A little mixture of both.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I think when you first hit the wall, you know, and I took my time turning around, because when I hit the wall, Greg, it's funny because the crowd erupted. Yeah. So I thought, oh wow, man, I have a fifth. I know this sound, right? Because our dormitory overlooked the pool. So we wouldn't go the first couple of days, but we stood out on our balcony and watched the races. So I felt that. I knew what that noise was, because that noise would only happen when an American won. But there were 2 Americans in the race. It was myself and Mike Keith. So I think, oh, I'm going to sit here and enjoy this. If you watch the race, it takes me about 3 or 4 seconds to turn around, because I'm thinking, just in case I don't win, at least I'm going to enjoy this, pretending like I won right now. But you know, I turn around and obviously I start going nuts. But it was pure joy from there. But after a while, I felt relief. You know, it felt like this balloon that had been blown up, and I just popped it. And finally get to this moment.
And then to go on and win 2 more golds in the relays with your brothers in arms. I mean, how did those experiences compare? I mean, it must have been an incredible feeling to win in a team.
Yeah, it was. It was, doing a relay is obviously special because you share the love, you share the joy, you share the heartbreak with your brothers. And for me, it was definitely a special moment. The guy that got second to me, Greg, was Australian. I don't know if you know, but his name was Mark Stockwell.
No,
Mark and I are still very good friends.
I saw that, and he was one of the favorites going into it. And
he was a favorite. He top seed.
He ended up winning.
He got silver. He got silver
in that one, though, but didn't he? I should know this, was he in 88?
He won. The Aussies won silver in both the free relay and medley relay.
Yeah.
I actually did 60 Minutes did a story on that race from Australia. 60 Minutes Australia did a story on that race between Mark and I, and they interviewed us both and everything because of the controversy of the start and everything, because he got left on the blocks.
Yeah, he did. Swimming's kind of a big deal in Australia. I don't know if you know that.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me?
We love our swimmers.
If I could live anywhere else in the world except the United States, it would no doubt be Australia. People ask me all the time what my favorite, I'm digressing, but my favorite country in the world, hands down, is Australia. I just love the country. I love the people.
Yeah. Well, you would have been there for
everything
announcing, right? In 2000. That would have been
I was there. That was my 3rd Olympics by that time, and I did the broadcast. And people ask me my favorite Olympics, and obviously the perfect storm of 2008 and Michael and everything was cool, but my favorite Olympics was Sydney, just because of the knowledge that Aussies had. I mean, people recognized me when I walked down the street in Sydney, Australia.
Oh, yeah.
This was 16 years after I won. They have an incredible appreciation for the sport of swimming, and that means a lot to me.
Yeah. Well, I think when we first met a couple of months ago on a Zoom call or whatever, I was pinching myself that I was talking to Rowdy Gaines, mate, and I still am. I'm sitting here going, I'm talking to Rowdy Gaines, because
brother.
Yeah, we grow up. It's like before the Olympics and in Sydney, the billboards were Michael Klim and Ian Thorpe and Grant Hackett. I mean, these, and I'm only mentioned the men, obviously. The women have been just outstanding. And
Madam Butterfly, Susie O'Neill.
Thank you very much. I mean, we just had so much depth there. What was it like? You had your swimming career. Did you know what you wanted to do next? I mean, you got into announcing. Was it right away, or was it about 5 or 6 years later? Did you know that that's what you wanted to do? No. My father was a motion picture director, and I that's what I wanted to do in my life. I wanted to direct movies. Huh. I was asked to do Battle of the Network Stars, which was on a fledgling network nobody had ever heard of called ESPN in 1985, where these stars from different networks would compete against each other in different sports. And they asked me to do the swimming part. And it was in Orlando where I was living. I said, I guess. I don't know what I'm doing, but yeah. So that kind of led from one thing to another. I was asked back to do it again, and then started doing different meets for TNT. Was covering meets back then, TBS. They did the Goodwill Games. I remember that. And then I auditioned for the 92 games and didn't make it. But I did the triple cast, which was a sort of the cable part of the Olympics in 1992 in Barcelona. Mm-hmm. And then I auditioned again in 96 for Atlanta and got it in Atlanta. And so Tokyo was my 9th Olympic Games. Just a quick mini break to remind you to go check out anyquestion.com/Rowdy Gaines. That's anyquestion.com/Rowdy Gaines. Listen to all his answers that he's got on there, and you can ask him follow-up questions from this podcast there as well. Cheers. You've been calling for so long now, 9 Olympics. How does the pressure of calling a race compare to actually competing in them?
Well, There's no comparison as far as pressure goes. I guess now, I mean, I would say that
when you first started, it must have been terrifying.
When I first started, yeah, it was very stressful. Was it as stressful as competing in the Olympics? Nothing. No. But yeah, I definitely would get nervous. So as you can probably tell, I love to flap my mouth. So I don't really get nervous about, chatting, talking. Mm-hmm. There's certain amount of nervousness, anxiety that you feel. And, are you prepared enough? But I always feel like, and it goes back to what you said earlier, I love swimming, Greg. Swimming saved my life. I was heading down a path that when I was a junior, that probably wasn't too good. I wasn't doing anything really bad, but I could tell I was going down a path that I felt like, could be a bad spot. And so when I went out for swimming, it literally changed my life. It saved my life. So I owe the sport so much more than it can ever owe me, And I love swimming. And I love to talk about swimming. I never get tired of talking about swimming.
No, I'm with you when it just comes to sport. It's been fascinating,
right.
100 plus episodes, and having great conversations with athletes and coaches and doctors and physiologists and entertainers and entrepreneurs. And it's been fascinating listening to the amount of people like yourself that it said when they found their passion and just how it helped them really in those adolescent years in particular, when we all deal with insecurities and who am I and what am I about, and how sport for the most part has been such a key influence into people finding themselves and finding the way out of those adolescent insecure years, which aren't easy. I don't look back at my adolescence with fond memories, but I do once I start adding in the sport of triathlon from the age of 14, 15. I'm like, oh, that's where I can see my life turn. So I get what you're saying.
Same here, buddy. Same here.
Yeah. And, calling these Olympics, let's look at this, it's not like triathlon, which is basically we got, a male, a female race, and now we have a mixed relay. So we got 3 days, but swimming, 8 days, or is it 9 days of
8 days? Well, yeah, this year it was like 8.5, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it's prelims, semis, finals, so many races to call. How are you able to actually, I mean, there's an endurance component here that I'm actually fascinated by, because keeping the energy up, sustaining it, do you get any sleep? Take me through a typical day when you're at the Olympics.
Well, we called Dan Hicks, my partner, and I called our 8th Olympic Games together. We started together in '96. So that's where it all starts of having the positive vibes around you is your partner. So I have a great partner who's like a brother. I love him dearly. A great mentor. He really helps me. He's a professional. He does all of NBC golf. He anchors NBC's golf. Just did the Winter Olympics for like the 8th time. So he's the ultimate pro. We have an incredible producer, Tommy Roy, who we've worked together on, he started in 04, so 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. That was our 5th Olympics with our producer. Mike Unger from USA Swimming helps on the broadcast. I couldn't do it without him. So we have a great team. That's where it all starts. And a typical day would be sort of like a swimming day, Craig. We're at the pool around 6 a.m. and we end up leaving, around 11 that night. 11 or 12 at night. And so it's a long day, but it's not like digging ditches. I mean, you're doing something you love to do. That's what my dad says. Quit complaining. I call my dad, halfway through and I tell him how tired I am. I go, are you kidding me? You're calling in the Olympics. Quit complaining.
I love your dad already. He's a tough man.
Yeah. This Olympics was unique because the finals were in the morning, like Beijing, and the prelims were at night. So, we had to get there really early and get ready and prepped. We have a production meeting that starts around 6:30. That goes for about 2 hours. And then, we're heading to the booth to call the 10 a.m. races. And then we have a little break of about an hour or so after in Tokyo would be the finals. So we had a cot in an edit room, and that Dan and I, we slept on the floor and tried to get an hour nap, and then started all over again for prelims that night, another production meeting, and do the prelims that night.
It's unreal. I think that's just fantastic. Now, look, I want to move on from here in one moment, but I have one final question, just talking about your announcing. Is there one call where you just think that was the best? You know, is there one that our listeners should go listen to say that was a really, not just the race, but maybe the way you called it that you walked away from, or is it just loads of them?
It's always such a hard question, Greg.
I got to ask it though, because
I know it. The patented answer is one where if you watch the race and you know the story behind the race, it's the 400 free relay from Beijing because of how epic it was. It's the drama before the race that created the absolute brilliance of what the race panned out to be. It lived up to everything it was predicted to be. And I mean, they did an 1.5-hour documentary on a 3-minute race. So it had to be pretty epic, right? So for me, that was, I don't know if it was a perfect call because it wasn't. I actually said twice during the race, I don't think the Americans can do it.
Yes, but that adds to it. That makes it even better.
Exactly right. Because everybody else, the guys on the relay still give me grief. Every time I see Jason Lezak, he always says, "Oh, are we going to win this race, Rowdy? Are we going to win it this time?" But nobody thought they were going to win. Yeah. I was just saying what everybody else was thinking. Right?
Yeah.
There's not one person that was watching that race that thought the Americans were going to win. Come on. And if they did say that, they're lying. There's no way.
But I actually think, talking about great commentary,
I know what you're going to say.
I actually don't enjoy knowing the result from a commentator. I always feel like it's create the suspense of, even if the Americans have got a 2-body length lead, I want you to be telling me, I don't know, maybe they can do it, maybe they can't, and then I'm like, okay, well, now I'll watch. So I think the way you handle it, whether you meant to or not, I think was the perfect call.
Well, it was a fun race to call, and certainly will go down in history as I can't imagine another race matching that. But there have been a lot of really good ones. I mean, I can take you through every Olympics. 92 was Summer Sanders. Of course, I'm a little biased with the American side because I'm broadcasting to the American audience. But
of course,
Jeff Rouse in 96 in the 100 back. In 2000, it was probably Misty Hyman in that upset of the century at the time with Susie O'Neill, who, by the way, won the gold medal in the 200 freestyle. But she was Madam Butterfly.
Yeah.
And that was a huge upset. 2004. Again, it was sort of an upset because it was the 800 free relay for the United States over Australia. Ian Thorpe anchoring, or it could have been, and actually in 2004, it was another race of the century. Remember the 2004, we had Thorpe, Michael Phelps,
the 200 men's freestyle,
Peter Van den Hogenbaan,
Grant Hackett. Yeah, I remember that one. Of course. How do I forget that? That was the race that was amazing.
Yeah, that was an incredible race. So,
Ian Thorpe did get that
one, by the way. There.
He did get that one on those guys, and Phelps was in there, young Phelps, and that was. I mean, let's I like geeking out on stuff like this, and this was a question on any question when you go. They say, "What's the greatest race?" And many of you said, there's a lot of swimming experts on there. The 2008.
Do they say that? Is that what a lot of people say?
Yeah, I think there was quite a few that said the 2008 relay 4x100 meter freestyle relay in the men, and the US pipping out the French. But I just had Michael Klim on last week, and I would have to say the best race I've ever seen is the Sydney Olympic 2000, the men's 4x100 freestyle. Klim leading off, sets a world record, 48.18. Overcoming Popov's world record, I think. Leads off with a world record. The Australians then have this where they're going to cruise the first 50. When I say cruise, they're still flying, but allow the Americans almost to feel like they're in, and then they would swim back over them in the final 25. And they did that for the next second, third, and fourth leg. And then Ian Thorpe, who is probably not noted for him, he's phenomenal 100-meter freestyle, but probably more of a 200 specialist, and he held off, and he was half a body length behind with 50 to go, even 3/4 of a body length with 50 to go, and then he came back over the top over Gary Hall Jr., who was talk about the French talking smack. Gary Hall Jr. knew how to give it as well, didn't he?
I don't know if you can see it, but I'm strumming a guitar. Remember Michael getting up on the block and strumming a guitar? Because Gary Hall Jr. said they were going to smash him like guitars.
Yeah. Well, that's what Michael Clean said, that he was actually sponsored by big name guitar company, and he was sponsored by him, and so it was a way of him plugging his guitar company at the same time of saying, we're going to break you like a Gibson. Is it Gibson guitar?
Oh, a Gibson, yeah.
And so there was a bit more to it than that, but then the Aussies all got out and started strumming guitars after they beat them, and so it was a little bit of, as Australians, we don't like that kind of behaviour. There's a little bit, celebrate with a bit more dignity in. But I think... Oh,
but you deserved it.
We let him have that one.
Absolutely. I would have too.
Yeah. I mean, looking at swimming history, and particularly the 100-metre freestyle, and I love the 100-metre freestyle because it is kind of, to some degree, the blue ribbon event, like I said earlier. It's been amazing watching the world record drop. And I did do some homework before this, so this is not just sitting on the top of my head, but world record in 1905, 65.8. World record by 1956 was 55.4 with John Hendricks, Australian. So I got to mention him in the Melbourne Olympics. Definitely. In 1970, this is when the US just say, we're going to start trying to own this event. And, starting with Mark Spitz, Jim Montgomery. Jim Montgomery was the first to break 50 seconds in 49.99. And then you in 81, 49.36. Then lowered again by Biondi, and then Popov, and then Klim. Fast forward, we have the speed suits. Cesar Cielo, when he goes, what did he do? 46.91. That's right. But now, without speed suits, 12 years later, or this was actually, he did it 10 years later, Caeleb Dressel, 46.96. What are we talking about here? Are we just looking at... I know the starting blocks themselves have changed a little bit, but they're not in speed suits. I mean, where is the future of swimming going? But we're talking that a Caeleb Dressel could be going that fast without any help. Is there anything happening in lane lines, or is Caeleb Dressel the new, dare I say, Michael Phelps?
I think if you look at the sport overall, from each generation to the next, they're bigger and stronger. Our children and our grandchildren will be bigger and stronger than the previous generation. It's just the way it is. And I take the 50-yard freestyle. I know that's not swum internationally, but I kind of look at the 50-yard freestyle and sort of what you said. In 1976, Joe Bottom became the first swimmer in history ever to break 20. He went 19.7. 20 years later, 1996, Freddie Bousquet from France, who was on that relay for France, became the first swimmer to break 19. And then about 30 years, another 20 years later, or 21 years later, Caeleb Dressel became the first swimmer to ever break 18.
Wow.
Right? In 20 years, there's going to be somebody that breaks 17 seconds. It's just, but then you start thinking, right, Greg? You think, well, there has to be an end point.
Yeah.
It can't.
It can't go down to 1 second,
right?
In 150
right?
years.
No, it's not going to happen. So something's got to give to where it's going to end up plateauing for more, and then just a few short 20 years. But you also have to remember that records, for the most part, are broken up into 30 different events, men and women, and then you have records that are broken by hundredths of a second. So people ask me all about, well, what about all these world records? Well, yeah, a lot of world records are broken, but it's spread out over a lot of events, and a lot of them are broken by hundredths of a second. And when you take us back to Tokyo, I think there were only 2 world records broken.
It wasn't much.
Tokyo.
Yeah.
Women's 200 breaststroke and men's 400 medley relay, I think, were the only. Maybe the Aussie women broke the 400 free relay, but there weren't many. So I think, over time you're going to see eventually something happening where it plateaus, but it's not going to be, you and I aren't going to be alive. We'll be long gone, buddy.
I don't know. I mean, it's fascinating. I want to get Caeleb Dressel on the show, actually, because I'm not just a huge fan of him swimming, but I've been watching him answer questions, and he just seems...
He's really good.
He's just so good, isn't he? I mean, the guy's the most authentic, humble person I think I've ever seen. And then you look at his short bio under his name. It's like, 7-time gold medal, 19, world championship golds. You've watched swimming. You obviously know all the data. And obviously, Michael Phelps stands out above the pack. Not just in swimming, but in Olympic sports. The guy's just, 23 gold medals, 28 medals in total or something? And
28, 23.
We have Caeleb Dressel coming along. I mean, is that something you feel comfortable talking about, comparing them? Or, I mean, I know that is happening a little bit.
I mean, I know they don't feel comfortable about it, but I feel, I mean, first of all, they swim different events. So, I mean, Michael was a 200 butterflyer, 200 IM or 400 IM. That's not in Caeleb's wheelhouse, although he did go like 139, 200-yard IM. He could make the Olympic team in 200 IM if he wanted to. But, so they swim different events, although they swim a couple events that were the same. They both swim the 100 fly, obviously. They both swim the 100 free. But nobody will ever, and I'm sure, I don't know if you follow Twitter, but freezing cold takes. Have you ever seen that?
No, what's that?
Nobody will ever win 8 gold medals ever again. It's just not going to happen, because everything has to be perfect. And I don't think that perfection is capable of happening. No slight against Caeleb. It's just that, all the relays have to win. You have to swim at least 4 individual events. And the world is changed dramatically since Michael swam. It's become much more specialized. And that perfect storm will never happen. Now, I will say that Caeleb is the best swimmer on the planet. No doubt about it. He's a great, great person. I digress a little bit, but I talked to him on the phone. This is a few months ago, and he called me and he said, "Rowdy, I have all these trophies and medals and plaques that I've won over the years, and I'd like to donate them to different charities. Can you help me organize that?" He wasn't interested in all that, hardware stuff. He was, he really wanted to make a difference in different charities. And so he's just that kind of guy, man. He's a wonderful human being, and a great representative of the sport.
He truly is. I mean, both of them are outstanding people and amazing stories within themselves. That 8 gold medals. So this is one thing. How many individual medals gold medals did Michael Phelps get?
He won 5.
Individual?
Overall together, during his whole career.
Yeah, overall.
Well, we have to add that up because he won.
Because how many of them
3 relays? Well, let's see, he won 3 relays in 04, 08. That's 6. He won 2 in 12, which makes 8. And in 16, he won 2 more, so that's 10. So he would have won 13 individuals. 13
individuals still. See, that's... Because I always have this like, well, like you said, it all has to come together with relays and everything else. And if Michael Phelps was swimming for, well, I won't mention a country because that's not fair, but a country that's a non-swimming country, he'd still be looking at 13 individual gold medals, which has never been done before either. And that's where I think it's just... I
take that back, Greg. Hang on. It was 12. 12. Because they won 3 relays in 04, 08, and 16. U.S. won all 3 relays in 16. And then they won 2 in 2012. So that's 11, which would have been 12 individuals. But, sorry, I'm still thinking in my mind. It's still crazy, right?
No, but I love this conversation because I did put it out on the Any Question Up when I said, who's the greatest all-time athlete in history? Now, obviously, the swimming channel as a whole probably had Phelps, mentioned a lot. Not every swimmer actually said Michael Phelps is the greatest athlete in history.
Sure.
He was a part of nearly when everybody was trying to break it up and, in their mind, they go, oh, well, this person, I got Jordan, I got Kelly Slater, Tom Brady, blah, blah, and he was always in that conversation. Even if they didn't end up with him, he was always a part of it. You were you were quite certain it was him though, right?
Yeah. I mean, I even put it out on Twitter the other day. I was having fun and said, who's your Mount Rushmore of greatest athletes? I think it was after Tom Brady had an amazing season this year and had retired. Oh, it was right after he retired.
Right.
And so I put Michael and then Jordan, Tom Brady and Muhammad Ali. But You know, you can't argue against Kelly Slater. You can't argue against LeBron James. You can't argue against Hank Aaron or Babe Ruth. I mean, it's all barroom talk. It's all opinion anyway.
It's all fun, mate. It's one of my favorite conversations.
It is. But, you know, I think Michael is.
Yeah. I just think it's fantastic. And
dude, I won 3 gold medals over 8 days. I swam 4 races in 8 days. We didn't have semifinals. I swam 4 races in 8 days and literally thought I was going to die. I was so exhausted. He swam 17 races in 8 days and won 8 gold medals in one Olympics. Forget about the 28 medals and 23 golds, but just in one single Olympics.
Yeah.
17 times. Come on. He swam in 5 Olympics. It's 2000, 04, 08, 12, 16.
Yeah.
Come on. The longevity, and he won golds in every Olympics except his first one in 2000. He was 15 years old. I mean, come on. I mean, he's the greatest.
I love it. See,
I'm right and everybody else is wrong.
There we go. Okay. Here we go. The passion's kicking in. This is exactly what I wanted. No, I think it's just, you know, I'm looking forward to when we do have a beer and catch up, and we'll just put that one on and we'll just talk about that for an hour, because, you know, you mentioned it, a lot of names up there, but we're obviously missing probably another 50.
Oh yeah, no doubt. No doubt we're missing a lot of it. Same goes for the women.
Oh, absolutely. You know, we haven't touched on the women. We haven't
touched women, but Serena and Katie, I think I had put Serena, Katie, Babe. Very few people know Babe Zaharias Dickerson. She was freaking amazing.
Nobody ever mentions Margaret Court, by the way.
Margaret Court is another one that
she still has one more Grand Slam than Serena Williams, and yet we tend to skip right over that when we're in the US.
I know.
And nobody mentioned Don Bradman. Do you know who Don Bradman is?
No.
Okay, well, the second most popular sport in the world is cricket. Did you know that? Number 1 being soccer.
Yeah.
And he's the greatest batsman of all time with a 99.84 run rate.
I have heard of him. In fact, I had some people mention him when I put that Mount Rushmore out. Why isn't cricket in the Olympics? I never have understood that.
I mean, they could probably do the 2020, which is more of a sped up, you know, shorter made for television type series. I know India would love it. The Indians, you know, cricket is their number 1 sport by far. Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. We have golf and soccer and that's the other one. Soccer players.
It's the second most popular sport, you would think.
Yeah.
Just based on its popularity alone. Maybe that can't be done in 16 days.
Maybe it's not global enough. You know, as much as it's popular, you know, it's big in India, so that's what really pumps it up a bit.
Yeah,
but I think you still
baseball? It's got to be more popular globally than baseball.
I don't know. Baseball's all around. I mean, we have it in Australia, Japan,
but not in Europe.
No, I guess it's not much in Europe. I don't know. I don't know how the IOC works or how they make up their decisions made. I'm actually surprised that nobody mentioned, actually one person mentioned a soccer player when we were talking greatest of all time. I'm like, how did Pele? Or Ronaldo or Messi, you know, this generation, Maradona. I know the Argentinians would love a shout out with Messi and Maradona. I mean, you know, and then the women's sport, for me, you know who I just think is one of the most beautiful athletes to watch is Alison Felix.
Yeah.
Just the way
she was mentioned when I put it out there. She was one of the picks for
she won a gold medal at 4 Olympics. Yeah. You know, on strong relay teams too, but just watching her move, I just always thought was just pretty to watch. You know, when you watch. Anyway, I digress. Yeah. We could go on and on, but mate, what do you think with swimming now, with the ISL, the International Swimming League? You know, the future of swimming, is it becoming more professional? Are the athletes becoming bigger names? Is that enough? What else has to happen to make swimming become bigger, especially in the US? You know, where a lot of the television and sponsors are.
It's not an easy answer, Greg. I think we've tried a lot of different avenues to reach a more popular base here in the United States. And, you know, the Olympics is so ingrained in everybody. And I'm not real sure there can be, at least, again, in my lifetime, something as popular as the Olympics. But I do give credit to the ISL and making the attempt. I think it's great for the athletes. Getting back to what I said earlier about me not making any money, I'm so happy for the athletes now that can, put a little money in their pocket and swim professionally. I think it's wonderful. Excuse me. I think it's wonderful, and I think it's something that can only help our sport. I think FINA is going to come along and make some changes to help the athletes. So I think we lost sight. We have lost sight. When I say we, it's not just FINA. It's not just the IOC. I think it's across the board that we've lost sight of what's best for the athlete. I think now with the way the athletes are able to have more power and more strength in being not necessarily unionized, but being able to come together, I think it will help future generations. And I give credit to a lot of the current athletes now in taking a stand and say, we need to do what's best for us. And I don't think they're necessarily thinking about themselves. And the perfect example of that is Adam Peaty. I think he ends up making some sacrifices to do what's best for the sport in the future. I really admire Adam Peaty and what he stands for, the greatest breaststroker in history.
Oh, easily.
And
yeah.
He sort of epitomizes that athlete of today that not only thinks about himself, but also thinks about the future of the sport.
Yeah, it's interesting, in the sport that I'm in, triathlon, is, they just started recently the Professional Triathlete Organization, backed by Sir Michael Moritz, the big VC investor, who has fronted up a considerable amount of money and allowed the Professional Triathlete Organization to take their time to get it right. It's not like a big sponsorship amount of money and where's our return of investment right away. They're saying, build it, make it more professional. It's athlete run. What do the athletes need to become more professional? And it's going to be interesting to see what happens. It's only a couple of years in. It launched almost at the worst time, right before COVID, and they did supplement all the athletes, I think, ranked in the top 100, got them all through COVID, sent them all checks and helped them out, and putting on big sort of $1 million prize purse wins and different types of formats. And they're really doing a lot to try and change the landscape of it being less owned by individual entities and giving it more back to the athletes. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, and potentially that's something that the swimming world can do and the swimmers can do as well. I threw some ideas at Bruno Fratis when he was in here chatting with me, and I figured I'll throw these out to you and get your thoughts. So I think swimming could remove the lane ropes and have 16 people in a race.
Oh my gosh, wouldn't that be great?
I'm just saying, this is just to get audience,
Yeah. I love it.
I think we should have them get out at each end and run around the blocks. I know they do that in training anyway. And then we could actually, because that's, triathlon, we do that now for the Olympics. They make them get out each lap. And usually it's just a 2-lap swim. But it's great because then you get them running out and then you get these magnificent dives back into the water. So it's something to think about, when you talk about just getting people more eyes and more interest. What do you think of my ideas so far?
I love it.
Okay. Bruno was all against it. So
I think we should never be afraid to fail.
Yeah.
Taking risks in life is a part of what makes you strong. I took a risk by using the track start. Yeah. You know what? I love change. Change is healthy. Well, I take that back. I don't love change. I hate it. I'm so stuck in the mud, wanting routine, go to bed at 9 o'clock every night. I'm just
me too.
But when I do change, Greg, it is healthy. Mm-hmm. After I've made the change, I'm freaking living out here in the middle of nowhere, which was really scary, but that change is healthy. I think it's been good for me. It's helped me grow as a person. So I know I'm getting deep dive here, but I think getting back to your point about making changes, putting 16 kids in the water, take those lane lines out, that would be fun. Don't be afraid to change. I'm not sure that would be the one that would pass, by the way.
No, I don't know either, but I think
anything that would be good for the sport to grow would be awesome.
I think so too. I mean, it comes back to that old saying, doesn't it? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome is, definition of insanity. But, anyway, mate, this has been fantastic. I have a couple questions I'd like to ask you.
Sure.
All right. So the first one, what 3 people, not family, would you invite to a special dinner and why?
What 3 people?
3 people. Anybody in the world. And it can be past or present. I mean, up to you.
Right, right. Well, I am a big war buff.
Mm-hmm.
I watch documentary after documentary on war.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I would love to invite George Patton.
Mm-hmm.
He's one that was an incredible leader in World War II, but very controversial.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see what made him tick. I got a chance to meet Muhammad Ali twice.
Wow.
But I would love to invite him to dinner. I mean, I carried on a 60-second conversation with him once, and the other time it was just, I shook his hand. But boy, he was a fascinating human being, perhaps the most popular athlete in the history of sport. And I would love to get to know him. Who would be the third one? I think for me, it would have to be somebody like Mother Teresa, who, made such a huge impact, and she was female. I have 4 daughters and 5 granddaughters. It's so bad in my house. I play with Barbies and I like it, Greg.
You poor man.
It's so bad. Shh, quiet. It's so bad in my house. I sit down to go pee now. That's how bad it is in my house.
You've totally given up.
Don't be laughing. That's a true story. So for me, it would be a great woman leader, like Mother Teresa, who would be somebody that, impacted the world on a global scale. I think globally, I mean, I'd love to invite Michael Jordan, but it was just basketball. I wanted somebody like a Muhammad Ali who impacted the world outside of his sport too. Well, Jordan did that too, obviously, but
I love that.
Anyway, those are 3 that jump off my mind anyway.
That is a fantastic. So my brother is a chaplain, but he also has a master in war history. And so you and him could sit down and
I would love to.
I can chat to you about swimming and sport all day, and then when you want to shift over to your other passion of war history, you can sit down with my brother. But what a great 3!
I can't wait to have a conversation with your brother.
Yeah. I mean, we do talk a lot, and I usually come at it with a bit too much. Like, I think I know what I'm talking about. And then he's like, nah, you're wrong there. Anyway.
No, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I just still love it.
Oh, me too. I
love history.
History. I'm the same as you. And it's becoming stronger history. The older I get, the more I...
Yes, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I really like your 3. I think that's absolutely fantastic. I've got the Queen of England in mind. I think Queen Elizabeth.
Queen of England. Oh, my wife and I have been watching The Crown.
How good is it?
Really good, isn't it? It's so good.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
What a woman, huh?
And my wife loves. Oh, she was amazing. I mean, say what you will about The Crown and about the royal family. It is what she's been able to do. I mean, I know we're getting into the weeds here, but what she's been able to do for the last, 80 years is just. It's just amazing.
It's amazing.
I mean, you have to give the woman credit to being, that's a good one, Greg.
Well, there you go. We'll have Mother Teresa and the Queen now. I think that's fantastic. Okay, one more question, then we'll say our goodbyes. But all
right.
What's one piece of advice you would give to someone to help just optimize their own lives?
I think for me is consistency. I think for us, everybody thinks, wow, you talk about loving swimming, and that's why I always tell them that the number one reason why I won was because of passion, right? We talk about that because I love swimming. I loved it. And I think that's one of the reasons why. But I didn't love it every single second. In fact, I hated pain, Greg. I don't know about you, but I hated practice.
I hate it.
I didn't like practice. I craved the feeling I had after practice.
Yes. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Do you like pain?
Of course not, mate.
Of course.
I like to race. If I could race every week, I would. That was my thing.
Right.
I just want to race.
But you don't get to do that, right? You've got to train. No. So I hated training, but I craved the feeling of what it felt like when I was done, right?
Yeah.
So getting back to that original question you had, you don't have to be perfect, but you have to be consistent.
Yes.
I feel bad for athletes or for people in general that have to feel like they have to be perfect along the way every single minute. You don't. You just have to be consistent.
Oh, that's great.
And again, there were many days I hated swimming, but I was consistent in my passion and my love for the sport. So for me, it would be try to learn about consistency in your life.
That's fantastic, mate. Just keep showing up, everybody. Keep showing up. All right, buddy.
Right.
This was absolutely a joy for me. So thank you so much for taking the time out. Really appreciate it. What's next for you? You any other? You've got the World Championships this year, I believe, are back on the calendar.
World Championships, which were reinstated just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
They canceled them, and now they're in Budapest. So I've got World's NCAA Championships in the college. I love the college championships.
Great.
More broadcasting, and I work for an incredible water safety foundation called Step Into Swim. It's part of the Pool and Hot Tub Alliance. Where we try to really make a difference in impacting children across the country and teaching swim lessons and trying to get children, especially in those underserved communities, the ability to learn how to swim. It's really important. Drowning is an epidemic in our country. And for me, nothing brings me greater joy than seeing a child learn how to swim.
Good man. Oh, I love that, mate. Do you know, we taught our daughter to swim, our 4-year-old. Our 2-year-old's giving us a bit more pushback on it, but she was like literally a fish to water. And I used a good old mate of mine, Laurie Lawrence. Do you remember Laurie Lawrence? Australian
Are you kidding me?
So his swim school
Laurie Lawrence is freaking Doc Councilman. He's like the man.
I got to get him on the show,
legend.
Actually. Yeah.
But
we did his swim school for our 4-year-old, and it was amazing how well it worked. And but our little guy, he actually had a moment in the pool, where he kind of fell in just enough that scared him about a year ago, and so it's taking a little bit more to have him want to do it, and so it's that whole slow process of pouring the water over his head and getting him used to it. And but we're almost there with him.
Every kid is different.
Every kid is different. Every kid, mate. No doubt. Well, that's called Step Into Swim. Is that
Step Into Swim?
Perfect.
StepIntoSwim.org. If you want to get more involved with teaching children how to swim, just log on to StepIntoSwim.org, and you'll learn a lot more about that.
Thanks, mate. All right, Rowdy, thank you so much for your time, mate, and just sharing your journey and all your knowledge. Really appreciate it. For everybody else, you can find the show notes, timestamps, and coupon codes at bennettendurance.com/media. All right, thanks again, Rowdy.
You too.
Thanks a lot for listening. If you enjoyed the show, your support would truly be appreciated. You can visit the Patreon page, or you can subscribe with your podcast app of choice. Don't miss the next episode, so subscribe and be notified. For show notes, if you want to know more, please visit bennettendurance.com. I'm Phil Liggett, and on behalf of Greg Bennett, here's to the next time, and I hope you will join Greg again very soon.